Welcome to the Damascus Road podcast. On the road to Damascus, Paul had a radical encounter with Jesus and his life was changed forever. That is what we hope and pray for here. Now, on to this week's episode.
Now, I am a parent of two, and one of the great joys of parenting is your children learning how to speak. It's wonderful to hear their little voices and get to know them in a whole new way as they unlock this whole new mode of expression. It is also fascinating because language is really complex, and there are countless rules about it that we just know subconsciously that they don't know and are just kind of learning about all on the fly. Now, you combine that with the challenge of correctly pronouncing and enunciating all these words that they are just learning right now. And the result is this really fun challenge of figuring out, what is my toddler saying? It's the latest game show and soon to be sweeping the nation. And we're going to play it right now. I have some audio clips of my toddler Joe speaking. And the challenge is going to be identifying what he is saying. Now, for some of these first ones, it's going to be an issue of pronunciation. But also, there's going to be some later on where the challenge is just understanding the meaning of the words. You might understand what he's saying, but do you know what he means? So if you think you know what he's saying, what he's referring to, shout it out after we listen to the audio clips. Okay? Pretty simple. Okay, let's get that audio cranked up and let's play. We're going to start with the warm-up round. These are going to be the easiest, most clear-spoken, and for people who do know Joe, probably the easiest to guess just based on the things that he likes to talk about. And each soundbite is going to play through twice to kind of help you all kind of hear what he's saying, and if people are struggling, we can play him again. So let's hear that first sound.
Joe and Jude. Joe and Jude.
Yes, he is saying Joe and Jude. Jude being his best friend and toddler son of Ryan and Megan, who are up here leading us in worship. Yes, Joe and Jude. Okay. Here is the second sound.
Beep ball. Beep ball.
He's saying baseball. Baseball may not be America's pastime anymore, but it is Joe's favorite pastime. He's really come to love it, especially this summer. Okay, but those were the warm-up rounds. I think the next one's going to get a bit harder, a lot harder, but just do your best. Here's the third sound.
Mama. Mama.
Ooh, those got loud. Okay. Any guesses? Lee, you were here in the room when we were testing this. Well, Lee is right. He maybe cheated, but Lee is right. To be fair, I had Lee play a game earlier this year that was designed for him to lose, so Lee maybe deserves that. Yes, that is how he says marshmallow. It's very cute and it's very delightful. Okay, here we are. Here's clip number 4.
Hummingbird. Hummingbird.
Hummingbird. Good job. I'm glad people are doing well with this. He is saying hummingbird. We have a hummingbird feeder in our backyard, and he is so excited when they come to use it. Okay, this is the last one for round 2. Let's hear it.
Calico. Calico.
Catacomb? Okay, this one's hard. Any guesses? What is for catacomb? Classic in toddlers. Comes up a lot. Yeah, this one's the hardest. Catapult? Oh, that's a better guess. The answer is telescope. He is saying telescope. But actually, that's a trick question because that's not what he's referring to. He's referring to this. These rolls of tape that we just got for DR Kids that, you can look through like a telescope. And so now that kind of leads us well into the next round because these are the ones where Joe's not calling something by its name. Maybe he's describing it. Maybe he can't really say the real name or he doesn't even know what the real name is. So this is kind of our last round where you're not just trying to understand what are the words Joe's saying, but if you can gather and guess what the meaning of these words that he's saying. Okay, so let's begin and listen closely.
Blue cactus. A blue cactus.
Okay, barrel cactus. You're close. Cactus is right. That's not the first word, though. No. Okay. What? No. So what he's saying is blue cactus. Now, any idea what he means by blue cactus? I like that you guys are sticking with actual cactuses. No, he's talking about these things. Yes, when we drive around and you pass like a car wash, he gets so excited to see these things. And to be fair to him, I don't really know what the name for them is. Like, inflatable wacky 2-man is just what I Googled to get the picture. But so he gets so excited whenever he sees them. And if he sees one, and we're not driving by it, he, demands that we go out of our way so he can go right by it. Okay, here's our second to last one. Let's hear it.
Flamethrower. Flamethrower.
Wonderful guess. It is not flamethrower. Orange something, that's right. He's saying orange cereal. He loves his cereal. Any idea what orange cereal is? It is Honey Bunches of Oats. Specifically the honey roasted ones, because they come in the orange box. So that one was actually, at least he is talking about cereal. Okay, here is our very last one. Let's listen.
The Blue Poppy Show. The Blue Poppy Show.
So you think he's talking about Bluey? So he's saying Blue Puppy Show, and you think that means Bluey. Meg has it. It is Lilo and Stitch. Despite the prevalence of many children's shows featuring blue puppies, he is in fact referring to the show where it's not a puppy, it's an alien. But yes, Blue Puppy Show does mean Lilo and Stitch. He also loves Bluey. He just says Bluey. So thank you all for playing the game of What Is My Toddler Saying? I hope you all had fun. You all did really well. I was a little worried we were going to listen to 8 clips and nobody would get any of it. So you did well, but yeah, pretty challenging, right? Now, my wife, Megan, and I, we definitely have an advantage because we're his parents. We have learned to understand him. We know what he's referring to, and we just have a lot of time with him. And understanding a toddler requires context, familiarity, and practice. And that's going to be relevant. Just a second, though. Because now we're coming to the final week of our summer series, the Chaos Dragon. And as we've been tracing this theme and this motif throughout the Bible, we're now coming to its natural conclusion, the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible. And just as the thread of the Chaos Dragon begins at the very beginning of Scripture, it's going to continue on until the very end. And I'm sure many of us feel a little apprehensive to turn to this book of Revelation. It's one of the most intimidating books of the Bible. It's full of crazy stuff. There are 4 horsemen, there are plagues, there's seas of glass, there's crazy multi-eyed and multi-winged beasts, there's angels playing trumpets, there's angels pouring out bowls, flying cities, mysterious numbers, the Antichrist, lions, lambs, and yes, dragons. It foretells the end times. If we can crack it, then does it tell us when Jesus is going to come back and everything that's going to all happen around it, right? So how in the world, though, are we supposed to understand this? Are we looking for specific modern parallels? Are there prophecies in Revelation that are being fulfilled right now? Videos on YouTube and social media are making all sorts of claims that are rooted in this book. So do we just throw our hands in the air and give up? Or do we shrug because it doesn't matter? How does this work? Well, that's why we played the game, because hear me out. Understanding Revelation is a lot like understanding a toddler. It requires context, familiarity, and practice. And with a little bit of all three, and with the help of our summer series, I think we can start to understand this complex, mysterious, and awesome book a little better, and see what God has for us today, as well as what God has been doing throughout history. So to begin to understand Revelation, we kind of need to start with what Revelation tells us about itself. In chapter 1, verse 1, we read, "This is a revelation from Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the events that must soon take place. He sent an angel to present this revelation to his servant John, who faithfully reported everything he saw. This is his report of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. God blesses the one who reads the words of this prophecy to the church, and he blesses all who listen to its message and obey what it says, for the time is near." And these verses tell us two key things about the book of Revelation. Revelation is one, a revelation, hence its name, and two, a prophecy. Now, first, what does that mean to say it's a revelation? Well, in Greek, the word for revelation is this word, which is, or we translate also as apocalypse. Now, I know when you hear the word apocalypse, we kind of naturally imagine like a mass destruction event. Certainly a lot of movies like to lean into this. And it's kind of an apocalypse, it's the beginning of the end of the world. But simply, actually, apocalypse simply means revelation. It's not an event, but apocalypse is actually a genre of Jewish literature with its own rules and tropes and style. And it uses symbolic visions that reveal a heavenly perspective on history in light of that final outcome. Apocalypse literature communicates through symbolic imagery and numbers, but its point is not to be a secret predictive code about the timing of the end of the world that we are meant to decode today. That's not what it is for, but that is how it has been used and abused by many who employ problematic theology and biblical interpretation practices to make these specific declarative statements about the end of the world. We can find many examples of this kind of theology in books or YouTube and podcasts, even in churches, and it even has been influencing our politics. And the temptation's easy to understand because who wouldn't want to know if the world was going to end next Thursday? If Jesus was coming back and I knew it was going to be tomorrow afternoon, I'd be like, hey, that would be a really helpful thing to know. But if that is what Revelation is telling us, if its goal is to tell us the when and where of the end times, well, then its only reason for existence is just for the church at this one particular point in history. But that's not what it is. That's not what any book of the Bible is for. Instead, Revelation is a symbolic vision for every generation of the church. Revelation contains visions and fantastic images with a focus on the end of the world to emphasize God's sovereignty over the present, or present events, and it takes an interest in the relationship between the present and the future. And these symbols, honestly, actually are not as opaque as we think they are. The people who wrote Apocalypse, because this is a genre of literature, there's only one in the Bible, well, actually, but there's not other books of Revelation, but there were a lot of other examples of this genre written by Jewish scholars and authors in kind of an ancient world. And kind of one of the rules of people who wrote Apocalypses is that they are Bible nerds. So one of the rules of the genre, and John, who wrote the book of Revelation in the Bible, no exception. He is a Bible nerd. John filled his revelation with references to the Bible, and he expects the reader to discover what those symbols mean by going back into the text and looking up and to understand what he is alluding to. Now, the second key detail about Revelation, according to John, is that it is a prophecy. This means that Revelation stands in the tradition of the biblical prophets, for whom prophecy was a word from God spoken to God's people to warn or comfort them. Now, we commonly misunderstand prophecy and think it's about telling the future, but that's not really what prophecy is. The prophet's role was to speak God's truth into present circumstances. They are speaking about now, their present, whatever that was for them. They're not the future. Now, obviously, many of the Old Testament prophets did point forward to Jesus, who fulfilled prophecies. But those prophets were first and foremost, they were speaking into their present circumstances. And the fulfillment of those prophecies is God's overarching plan and wisdom, using these motifs and themes and images that the people would be familiar with and know and be looking for in order to point them towards the ultimate truth, the ultimate fulfillment of all of God's word in Jesus the Messiah. Now that's a little simplified, but it does help us to understand the main role of the prophets was to be sent to real people, addressing their real situations. They're not just speaking to future people and future generations. John is speaking to real people of the first century church. So the meaning of his work must be anchored in the context of John's time, place, and audience. Revelation cannot mean anything to us without it first meaning something to them. Any interpretation that relegates the meaning of Revelation entirely to a time in the distant future is not taking seriously how Revelation itself defines itself. So we really need to keep this in mind as we hear many pastors or theologians or influential voices in our culture tell us about how current events are the sole fulfillment of Revelation and of all these symbols, and how these are all signs of an impending end of the world. I call this the Left Behind principle, named for the popular series of Christian fiction that simply should not be telling us how to live our lives because it is a work of fiction. Though I do know people who do. So in this case, we need to understand the context that John was addressing when he wrote Revelation. Revelation, just for some quick background, is a circular letter like other books in the New Testament, like 1st and 2nd Peter, that was written to like a series of churches that were expected to get the letter, read it, and pass it on to the others. John addresses his letter to 7 first-century churches in Asia Minor living under the Roman Empire. This is a very different context than our present day. At that time, Christianity is a minority religion. People thought Christians were atheists because, well, they only believed in one God instead of like the dozens or hundreds that many did. They thought Christians were incestuous because we call everyone our brothers and sisters, and they didn't really get that. They thought Christians were cannibals because they also didn't understand like body and blood language of communion. So people at the time thought Christians were weird and were very unsure about how to engage or about engaging at all with these atheist, incestuous cannibals, as they thought they were. Christians also, their faith also impacted their participation in the marketplace whenever it would conflict with Jesus' teaching, causing economic hardship and isolation. That's a thing that's commonly addressed throughout the New Testament epistles from like Paul. But the biggest difference for these Christians receiving John's letter for them to us today is they just simply don't have power. They don't have political power. Anything like the representative democracy that we have here or the influence the church can still experience today is pretty much impossible for them to imagine. They did not have power and had a real fear of persecution from the government of Rome. They truly live in an empire where they have reason to be afraid. John is writing to Christians who are facing a real choice between compromise or faithfulness. And to these Christians, he describes faithfulness as conquering the empire. It is by faith that it's the faithfulness as well that conquers. So he encourages them by rooting his message in the Bible and reminding them that God is greater than any of these earthly empires. John employs the genre of apocalyptic literature to offer a heavenly and eternal perspective on these present troubles. And he speaks with the authority of a prophet to carry God's truth to them, to offer comfort and correction. And he constantly calls them back to the scripture that they're so familiar with, to remind them of who God is and what God has done to call them to faith in God. John's true message, rooted in this context, is relevant to us today. We just miss it if we misunderstand the context and style of communication that we're reading. And that leads us to, instead of being prophetic signposts to another world, instead of showing people that the way of Jesus is better, we ourselves then just blend in and we become invisible. Instead of being salt and light, we go unnoticed. The context John is talking to 2,000 years ago is still relevant to our struggle today. So it's worth reading and diving into and understanding how to engage this book well. To help us work through this, though, there are 3 principles to kind of summarize what I've been teaching to help us understand Revelation. And we can all employ these as we approach the book. 1, we're not looking for secret codes to tell us about the end of the world. It's not the main goal. 2, meaning must be anchored in the context of John's time, place, and audience. And 3, the key to understanding Revelation is using the Bible to understand the symbols and illusions. And one of these illusions is the Chaos Dragon. And since we have been spending all summer learning about how the imagery of the Chaos Dragon is used throughout the Bible, I think now we are all more prepared to understand how John is now employing it in Revelation to call us to faithfulness instead of compromise. So now instead of me just telling you what all of what Revelation means or looking at it and teaching it, We're going to read Revelation together, and I'm going to leave it up to you all to help us understand what John is saying. You guys can understand Joe. I believe in you now that you guys can understand John. Now, we're not going to figure out everything right now, but I just kind of want to give us some confidence and help us to see that we can understand more of Revelation than we think, just by starting to learn to see the patterns and references that it has rooted in Scripture. So if you have a Bible or a Bible app on your phone, go ahead and open up to Revelation 12. Or if you need one, like we got some of our extra Bibles out, if you want to grab it. If you're like, where's Revelation? It's at the end of the Bible. Makes it like the second easiest book to find, probably to Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible. So just flip to the end, and I'd encourage you to open up to Revelation 12, because this is where the Chaos Dragon really starts to come into play in Revelation. So we're gonna read it. I'm gonna read it, and then we'll kind of work through it together. Okay. Give you a second. So we're gonna start with verses 1 through 6. We're gonna kind of do it in 6 verse chunks. Okay. So let me read. Then I witnessed in heaven an event of great significance. I saw a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon beneath her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant, and she cried out because of her labor pains and the agony of giving birth. Then I witnessed in heaven another significant event. I saw a large red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, with 7 crowns on his head. His tail swept away 1/3 of the stars in the sky, and he threw them to the earth. He stood in front of the woman as she was about to give birth, ready to devour her baby as soon as it was born. And she gave birth to a son who was to rule all nations with an iron rod. And her child was snatched away from the dragon and was caught up to God and his throne. And the woman fled to the wilderness where God had prepared a place to care for her for 1,260 days. Okay, that's pretty crazy. There's a pregnant woman, there's a 7-headed dragon, and there's a baby who's going to rule the world with an iron rod. So I can help us kind of fill in the gaps, but I think we can work through this together, though. I do believe in that. Okay, so let's start with kind of the first image we see, this pregnant woman with a crown of 12 stars. So I'm just going to open up. What do you immediately, connections do you make? What observations do you make when you think about this woman? You see this imagery. So this woman with a crown of 12 stars. 12 apostles. Yeah, the number 12 is very significant. 12 tribes, 12 apostles. Well, in this case, we said they were apostles. So sometimes I think that's I think I'll say it. These 12 stars are pointing us to tribes, and I know sometimes they can also be heavenly beings. So there's kind of some multiple meanings sometimes that we can have to sort through. Yeah, if you remember back to the very beginning, talked about the seed of the woman. So, who's that woman? Oh, I was saying who's the woman? Genesis. Yeah. Okay, we've had a couple pretty significant pregnant women in the Bible. Many, but you mentioned Eve and Mary seem to come to mind reading this about this pregnant woman. What do you guys think about she's has the sun and the moon? That's kind of an interesting imagery. I don't know, what does that evoke for you? These things that God has created and said. And now is clothing her. Yeah. What do you guys think of that number 1,260 days? That sounds pretty specific. Well, how many, if somebody has a calculator, or 3.5 years? Exactly, yeah. I think I want to encourage you. If anytime you see a really specific number like that, think about how might this, what is this in months or years? And 3.5 years is half of 7. And 7 is a really significant number in the Bible. It's this number of wholeness. Creation, Sabbath, rest every 7 days. Even goes in Leviticus, we have the Sabbath year, that's every 7 years. And there's this whole year of rest. So 1,260 is half of that. So it's significant, but it's this incomplete period of time. It's temporary. I thought it was interesting. She goes, that's one thing we've been talking about this summer is the wilderness is this chaos realm. For me, it also made me think of the wilderness where Jesus goes, like to be with God, to like seek out solitude. And it's the same word. The word in Greek for this is eremos, which is the word you would find in like when Jesus goes out into the desert to fast and be tempted by Satan, kind of in preparation for his ministry. So sometimes the wilderness is this like chaos realm, but also other times it's like place where like we go to be with God. So it's kind of, but it's also like outside the garden. So like I said, we're not going to come to be like, here's exactly what everything means. But it is like worth like, what else do we hear these in the Bible? Yeah, I think to me a lot, just want to emphasize, like it evokes to me like Mary and Eve and these like mothers that like, in Genesis 3, it's like this is kind of playing out what God says of like, what did the son of like, he's speaking to Eve of like, the serpent will strike his heel and he will crush his head. And now we're kind of like getting that kind of playing out in this vision with actual like the birth of this child. Okay. So next we see, so there's then the red dragon. The red dragon has 7 heads, 10 crowns, or 10 horns and 7 crowns. So this one has a freebie for anybody who's been, what does this dragon connect us to? Yeah, it's a chaos dragon. I was like, that's an easy one. Okay, we've been talking about a chaos dragon. Here's a literal dragon. That makes that pretty easy. Fun math thing. If you guys, in another place where you hear a lot of the, like, these creatures with all these many heads and horns is in Daniel. And Daniel also has an apocalyptic vision in chapter 7. And if you go to that, and if you add up all the heads and the horns, there's like, in Daniel, there's like these 4 beasts. And if you add up all the heads and horns of the 4 beasts, you get 7 heads and 10 horns. Thank you, Alyssa. So that's one thing about Revelation we're learning. You might have to do some math. I would, just to share a little bit, as we've been based on the Bible Project, Tim Mackey, who's a very smart man, he argues this is all a reference to God's people. That stars, especially in this context where we see sun and the moon maybe more fulfills the celestial beings, and he talked about like 12 stars, which again connects us to God's people through like the tribes and stuff. So he argues that in this case, we're still consistently looking more at like God's people. Another number pops up, 1/3 though, just 1/3 of the stars, or that, if you're familiar, if you ever read through Revelation, you'll notice these like a lot of fractions. And just, I think something, since we're just looking at Revelation 12, we won't see this, but if you go through Revelation, you see these like increasing, like these fractions, like 1/4 of like whatever is destroyed, and then it's like 1/3. And that's like, kind of stands out, it's like, but it's never total. It's increasing this destruction of God's creation, but it's never a total destruction. So it's like the dragon has power, but it doesn't have absolute power. It cannot destroy. Now, finally, for the sun that we see in here, what do we make of this baby? What do we think of this baby? Yeah, here's here's the passage. It's like kind of all playing out this Genesis 3:15. I will cause hostility between you and the woman, between your offspring and her offspring. He will strike your head, and you will strike his heel. And now we're like, here's these these offspring in conflict. And this like idea too that he'll rule with an iron rod is like just this image used in the Bible, like in Psalm 2. It's this like symbol of the Lord's rule. Like this is a child. Like this child is God. Yeah. So I think we can pretty confidently be like, I think this is Jesus, or like it's pointing us towards Jesus. Yeah. Just as a key, if you're catching on, Daniel's a great book to read in understanding Revelation. And definitely can help you be like, if you ever read Daniel and you get past, like, you're like, yeah, the lion's den, I know. But like after that, you get into these really weird visions. But like we can see now, those visions are kind of in conversation with these visions. And they kind of, and we see here in Revelation, the end of the story, Jesus has come, like he's died and rose again. And now we can kind of understand more and put things in conversation with each other. So yeah, so this kind of sets it up. We see in this first scene, conflict between a woman, a child, and a dragon. So, this is kind of the setup, and it kind of have those in mind because it kind of repeats. Like this chapter kind of like retells this conflict or versions of this conflict kind of 3 times. And so we'll kind of see that continue in the next set of 6 verses. So let me read 7 to 12. Then there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his angels, and the dragon lost the battle, and he and his dragon were forced out of heaven. This great dragon, the ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, the one deceiving the whole world, was thrown down to the earth with all his angels. Then I heard a loud voice shouting across the heavens, "It has come at last, salvation and power, and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters has been thrown down to earth, the one who accuses them before our God day and night. And they have defeated him by the blood of the Lamb and by their testimony. And they did not love their lives so much that they were afraid to die. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who will live in the heavens rejoice. But terror will come on the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you in great anger, knowing that he has little time." I appreciate, I think, because it'd be easy to, look at, 1,260 days just seems like, that seems, and in comparison to, little time, but it's well, if you understand, that's 3.5 years. That is also giving a limited time, and now it's kind of this, again, it's limited. Yeah, there's a limited time. It's not, this permanent fear, or this permanent power. Yeah, how do we win the war? As Megan and Ryan observed, this is what it tells us. We win the war by the blood of the Lamb. There's victory through death. And that is repeated again. And that was something that came up, as I said, earlier in the summer in a couple different places. When I spoke about Daniel, earlier in the summer, the kind of theme of Daniel that we can see when we look at it through the Chaos Dragon narrative is how often winning doesn't look like winning, and losing doesn't look like losing when we deal with the Chaos Dragon. And not only then we see that in Daniel, but we see it later fulfilled in Jesus. And that's something Brad, I think, talked about really well and taught us about how, the dragon's power, all the dragon can do is kill us. That is the sum of its power is death. And Jesus shows us that even that is not enough. Because with Jesus, there is life after death. We do not need to fear death. The dragon can do all it can to us and did all that it could do to Jesus, but Jesus still overcomes it. He is that lamb whose blood was spilled, and through him victory comes through death. Yeah, we're going to have a hard time if we're trying to, when we engage Jewish, writing and literature and be things should happen in a sequence of events, and we want to try to, that's how we're used to reading things, but try to impose that. We'll have a hard time because, yeah, the flow of time here is definitely, is this a sequence? Does verses 7, take up right after the end of verse 6, or is this kind of a repeat? Yeah, it's a little, these images don't necessarily flow in an order that we normally, yeah, definitely. It takes the passage in John and Revelation takes things that we know very story and time oriented in the moment. It makes it very cosmic, and here we see the same conflicts are playing out over and over and in a cosmic scale. That Jesus, it's it's a different perspective, and it's definitely one that it's I think us trying to understand ourselves and kind of our human perspective is very limited. But when you introduce these visions, you can almost we can kind of step back and see this that Jesus, it's that Jesus is timeless, as Jacob said. It's again another reminder that Jesus wasn't just didn't just come to existence. Jesus is God. Jesus has been, and in this, but and this conflict kind of plays out cosmically, not just you kind of see this bigger vision. Okay, I'm going to wrap us up. We're going to get to the last. We're going to end this chapter. Mostly, I'm going to leave out one verse. But let's read chapter 13 to 17. When the dragon realized that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But she was given 2 wings like those of a great eagle, so she could fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness. There she would be cared for and protected from the dragon for a time, times, and half a time. Then the dragon tried to drown the woman with a flood of water that flowed from his mouth, but the earth helped her by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that gushed out of the mouth of the dragon. And the dragon was angry at the woman and declared war against the rest of her children, all who keep God's commandments and maintain their testimonies for Jesus. So we're back to the woman, the dragon, and children now. I mean, it does seem to connect us, yeah. Now we've moved from just the child kind of being this singular Jesus to now it's it defines it for us. It tells us, yeah, who are her children? All who keep God's commandments and maintain their testimony. So it's all of the faithful. So thank you all. But yeah, I think just kind of again, but now it ends with this We're all, like, the children is more than just Jesus. We're all her children, all who keep God's commandments. And then chapter 12, it ends on this. The dragon took a stand on the shore beside the sea. So we end on a cliffhanger, right? The dragon is defeated, but something else is coming. There is expectation. What will emerge from the sea? I mean, I think after the summer, we might know what to expect. There is a monster. There's a sea monster. Was it Tannin? There's a Tannin. Is there another monster coming? But this kind of battle, these verses that we see, continues in chapters 13 and 14. So I encourage you all to read those. But we're not going to do it now. We'll stop here and we'll reflect on what John is telling us through these prophetic apocalyptic visions. So just think about, what meaning do you find in these verses about the chaos dragon in Revelation? And I'll let you think about that. But let me kind of bring it back together, kind of bring it all together now and help us kind of land this plane. So I want to, again, thank you all for participating. Thank you for engaging with Revelation. But as we get engaged with it, as we continue reading this book, I want you to remember that it is apocalypse literature. And apocalypse literature uses this revealing symbolic visions to reveal a heavenly perspective on history in light of this final outcome. It offers us perspective on our present so that we can live with the end in mind. In Greek, this word is telos. Telos is our end. It's our purpose. It's our goal. It's kind of where we're going. And when we have our telos in mind, when we have that in mind, we know where we're heading and how that can impact our present. And the telos of Revelation, or what Revelation tells us about our telos, is that Jesus will return as king to deal with evil and to vindicate his followers. It tells us that God wins. And while the dragon has some power now, that power is temporary and it will not last. The empire will not last. God does. Because there will be, at the end of all things, a new heaven and a new earth. Not one that fully replaces the old one, but it's a heaven and earth. It's a new creation. It's a restoration of all things. And all of creation now serves as God's temple. And in this new creation, we are a new humanity, fulfilling God's calling from Genesis 1, ruling as God's image. And Revelation assures us of what is coming. So the question is not, what does this mean for the future, but what does this mean for right now in our present? In a culture where compromise was rampant and the pressure to walk away from following Jesus to conform to the world was immense, John writes this letter to the churches to encourage them to choose faithfulness to God first. And that's as relevant for us today as it was to them. Through this chaos dragon narrative, John reminds us that the dragon does not win. He encourages us as followers of Jesus. He tells us that we can have victory when we choose not to love our lives so much that we shrink back from death. We are encouraged to choose faithfulness to God even when it costs us and over compromise to the chaos. The dragon may kill us, but it can do no more than that, and through Jesus we overcome death. We are victors, and this has tremendous impact on our present. We live differently and we love others differently than when we really believe that God is greater than the harm that anyone else may cause us. With our telos in mind, we can ask ourselves, what does it mean not to shrink back from death and to gain victory over the dragon in our own lives and relationships and communities? And keep that question in mind. Reflect on it and take some time this week to read Revelation 13 and 14 on your own. I want you all to believe that you can do it. You won't understand everything for sure. That's okay. And you'll have questions, I'm sure. But I do promise this book is not as mysterious and opaque as it may seem. Just keep in mind the 3 principles for understanding Revelation that I gave to you earlier. We're not looking for secret codes about the end of the world. Its meaning must be anchored in the context of John's time, place, and audience. And the key to understanding Revelation is using the Bible to understand the symbols and allusions. So with all of these in mind, as you read Revelation, take notice of the chaos dragon imagery and how John continues to use it to teach us about God and our telos, about the power of the dragon in our present, and who ultimately wins. I think that'll help you kind of get through a lot of it. But of course, as you have questions, I want you to write them down and bring them to your community here, at our church community at Damascus Road. And you can bring it. You can come talk to your small group about it, see what other people think. You can reach out to Ryan and I. We've both studied Revelation both together and in our seminary communities. And keep that in mind. That's a good rule for just all biblical interpretation, because we always need to read the Bible in community. Not just this book. This is a good rule for all of Scripture, to read it, unpack it, and interpret it with others. Otherwise, we are likely to misunderstand or misapply it. We need to help one another with our different perspectives, our different experiences, and our different expertises to understand what God has given to the community of God's people. And so now we have come to the end of our summer on the Chaos Dragon. I think it's been really fascinating to see how this story has been intentionally woven throughout Scripture, used by authors across 1,000 years to help us understand more about God, about order and creation, good and evil, and our place in it all. I hope we all feel more confident opening up our Bibles and diving deeper into its pages. And at the end of it all is this fascinating epic book. I know Revelation is intimidating, but I think it's a lot less confusing if we stop reading it for mystical signs and instead recognize it as an assurance to the church at the time and to us today that despite whatever we face, God wins. God's kingdom will ultimately prevail, and God is in control. You can understand Revelation. You can trust the Dragon Slayer. You can choose faithfulness without fear. Even when chaos rears it up like a dragon, when people and nations align with it, when we falter and follow it too, or even when we face death, God is greater than the chaos. God formed the cosmos out of chaos. The dragon's just another part of it. And we can trust in God's promise, and we can respond with faith and trust today. Please pray. Dear Jesus, thank you for this promise, this assurance, that you have won. The battle's decided. There's still danger, there's still threat. We still live in a culture that can make following and being faithful hard. But so was the people that this book wrote to. Even more so in some ways that we couldn't even imagine, Lord. And it's this encouragement to be faithful to you, Lord. As we navigate this world, I pray that we can keep that in our hearts, that we can walk with you, Lord, walk with one another, encouraging each other to stay faithful to you, Lord. Thank you for your love and your healing and your grace and your presence throughout the pages of Scripture and in our lives. In your holy name, I pray.
Thank you for joining the Damascus Road podcast. Our mission is to follow Jesus together by being with God, loving everyone, transforming people, developing leaders, growing new ministries, and changing the world. You can find out more about us online at DamascusRoadTucson.com.